So I used to be the director of Learning Works. We worked with at-risk kids and low-income families. And as the CEO, I was there for about 19 years. There's a number of times that we had to put changes in place that were pretty dramatic. Sometimes they were changes that were required, and sometimes they were changes that I felt like would be for the better. One time when I was dealing with something simple like vacation policy, and we were trying to shift from an earned time policy where you basically earned it every month to a PTO system, which basically said you put all your time together, your sick time, your vacation time, as opposed to where you just earn each one separately. I thought this would be a really good system because it would allow people to get a lot of their vacation right up front, and I would put it all together so the employee could make a choice about am I going to use it for sick time or am I going to use it for vacation time. It was kind of a way that gave the employee more flexibility, and it was a way on our end, honestly, where it actually helped our balance sheet because it became less of a liability. So I spent a lot of time sort of working with a few of my directors, and we came up with a really good policy, and it gave employees a bunch of time up front that they wouldn't have had otherwise, that they could use during the summer, because that was our fiscal year. And it helped on our balance sheet. They got, basically the same amount of time, but now they could use it as vacation. So then we went to the program directors level, and we basically rolled it out to the program directors. And what a mistake. I did it completely backwards. Probably could have gotten to the same place, but because I started with my senior directors for whom it affected less, and we were sort of able to be objective and look at it and I think come up with a good policy, there was no buy-in from my staff. And there was no buy-in, and subsequently there was a lot of fear. And I quickly lost control of the message. So I was unable to try to bring people back because they said, why are you changing our vacation time? This has all worked just fine. You're putting it all in this one pie. Yeah, but it sounds like we don't have quite as much sick time as we would have had, and now I've got to use sick time, but it could be vacation time, and all these questions. Even though I thought the answers to those things were fine, it was a tremendous lesson learned. That what I should have done is said to staff, we think we want to make some kind of change here. Here's what we're looking at. What do you have as input, and how do we make this work? We were able to take some input and make some changes that but in the end, people were still frustrated by it. An example where we did it differently, and interestingly, this change occurred before the other one, and so this one we did well, and that was we had to do an organizational structure change. So we had to sort of combine some departments, create more of a pyramid. We were very flat. So we were an organization that had like 10 different programs, all at the same level, and all sort of reporting to me. And we needed to create another level for more of a pyramid, better accountability, and more support. And so we went to staff and said, okay, which of these programs do you think could be working better together? Who do you think is a partner that you think if you were working with them and you had one person who could supervise and help you do a better job, that would be the kind of program you'd want to be with? And I had in my mind some thoughts about, okay, this program and that one and this one, and some of that was true, but I learned some interesting connections that programs had that I hadn't really realized before. For instance, we have an after-school program, works with elementary school kids, and we had an adult ed program for immigrants and refugees. I sort of thought, well, those are actually kind of different, so maybe we'd have an adult program structure here and a children's program here, but the after-school program said, you know what, a lot of the parents of the kids that we're working with here are in that program. So if we brought these two together, we might be able to create some family literacy opportunities that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So in both those stories, the lesson learned is you've got to go to the people who are going to be the most affected by the decision you're making, usually first, and try to get their input. It's not that you have to give them the power to make the entire decision, but you've got to go to them first and say, hey, here's where I'm looking, what do you think, and what would you do if you were going to make this kind of change? So community change, or political change perhaps, is different. As somebody who's on the inside, it's somewhat similar for me. I've got to reach out to the people who I serve with one by one and try to get their input and tell them the direction I'm going and get their thoughts. But in the end, ultimately, if you want to create change, it has to come from the outside, in the sense that people have to put pressure. I often say to people, we make a big mistake when we just elect somebody and then we think, oh, we've elected that person, they share my values, all's good. You have to remind yourself to stay engaged in the process and stay connected to the person and help to hold them to the values that you want. Because once you get inside, there's a lot of competing values, and they may not be black and white in terms of good and bad. They might actually be two good values, and you're trying to weigh them in which way do you go. And you need to know that the community still cares and says, no, you should go in this direction, this is the better one. Or don't just go half a step, go the full step, which is what happens a lot in politics. So change from a community, I think, while I get frustrated with elected officials who don't do the right thing when I want them to, I often go to the community and say, if an elected official didn't do what you wanted them to do, you've got to make sure that you go tell that person beforehand that you want them to do it, and that you'll be there for them when they do. Because sometimes we have to take very tough votes, and that you make a lot of people angry. And some people will try to take you out of office, and if we aren't there to try to help protect you, you're going to lose your job. And I think it's really important that the community stay engaged and really try to help elected officials, remind elected officials of the values that got them elected, and hold them to those values while they're in.